evening. A very special welcome to each and every one of you, and a very special thanks for choosing to be with us tonight, to take advantage of what I can guarantee to you is going to be a remarkable and unique learning experience. My name is Csaba Nikolényi. I teach political science. I'm a professor of political science at Concordia University, and I'm also the director of the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies. Our featured guest tonight is Professor Kumaraswamy, about whom I'm going to share with you a few more words just in a few seconds. But I would like to mention our genuine thanks to the Montreal Jewish Public Library for their continued collaboration, cooperation. This event tonight wouldn't have been possible without their always warm, forthcoming readiness to organize good things, important things with the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies. And this collaboration between these two fine institutions would not be possible had it not been to the dedication of everybody's favorite friend, everybody's delightful Roxana Bruns. So Roxana, thank you for being who you are, and thank you for doing all the great things that you do. And if there is a Roxana in the Montreal Jewish Public Library, we also have a Roxana at the Azrieli Institute of Israel Studies. And that is today my right-hand person, sometimes my left-hand person. It really depends on what I need, when I need it. And that is Jennifer Salomon. So Jennifer, thank you for doing the great things that you do and for being the wonderful person that you are. Professor Kumaraswamy. I met Kumar. He allowed me, in fact, he instructed me not to call him professor and not to call him by his very long, almost seemingly impossibly long name to pronounce. Just call me Kumar. I met Kumar in New Delhi this past fall on October 31st, when during my visit to Jindal University, where I gave a short course on Israeli politics, I got an invitation to a book launch. And the book launch was organized at the Institute for Defense and Strategic Analysis. It's a very important think tank controlled and maintained by the Indian Army, the Indian Defense Forces. And it raised my curiosity, especially the title. The title was Squaring the Circle, Mahatma Gandhi and the Creation of the Jewish National Home. I said, well, that's some circle to square, because anything that I remembered about the Mahatma's views about Israel, the Zionist cause, I wasn't so sure. And then I went to the event, and then I met Kumar. And I thought, whatever it's gonna cost, whatever it's gonna take, I would like to bring this person and share him with you and with our students. This morning, Kumar gave an absolutely wonderful lecture in my class on Israeli politics at Concordia, and brought a perspective about India-Israel relations that our students would simply just not be able to have. And I was really very gratified for that opportunity. Before I give you the official brief bio about Kumar, let me tell you that apart from the fascinating subject that he works on, what else grabbed me about the person? Not the scholar, but the person. When he was introduced at his book launch in New Delhi at this research think tank, he got up, and there were some very important people in the audience, the former Vice President of India, representatives of the diplomatic corps, the ambassador of Israel. Kumar got up and thanked his students for allowing him to be inspired constantly, to raise questions of intellectual curiosity, and for keeping him intellectually alive and aware. So this is a fine scholar that absolutely needs to come to Montreal. Let our friends, let you become acquainted with him and the important work that he does. And now here is Kumar, the scholar. Professor Kumaraswamy, I promise the last time that I will mention your honorific title, teaches contemporary Middle East, as it's called in India, West Asia, at Jawaharlal Nehru University. From 1992 till 1999, he was a research fellow at the Harry Truman Research Institute at Har HaTzofim at the Mount Scopus campus of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He has authored a number of books, countless articles, in addition to the book that he's going to be sharing with you today, Squaring the Circle, Mahatma Gandhi and the Creation of the Jewish National Home. He also wrote a book published by Columbia University Press, a seminal work on India's policy, foreign policy towards Israel. as well as a historical dictionary of the Arab-Israeli conflict. It is, I believe, in that connection that Kumar acquainted Professor Neil Kaplan, whom I saw earlier, who is also here joining us tonight. And I'm really truly happy that the Montreal Israel Studies community is connecting and is making further bonds as a result of this visit. Professor Kumaraswamy Kumar is the honorary director of the Middle East Institute in New Delhi, and he also edits the series titled Persian Gulf, India's Relations with the Region, as well as a journal published by SAGE, Contemporary Review of the Middle East. Ladies and gentlemen, I have already spoken far longer than you would have liked me to hear, and Kumar did warn me that the minutes I take up by his introduction is going to deduct from the 45 minutes that I gave him. I hope he was joking, and in that hope, I am going to turn the floor over and give to you Professor Kumaraswamy, all the way from New Delhi.
Thank you very much. I think in the long introduction you forgot a small additional information which might be of some interest to you. I found my wife at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and she came actually a few weeks before I landed in Israel, way back in 1988. So it's almost 30 years this October. And she teaches at the Hebrew University. I teach in JNU. What I would call, we have the Los Angeles-New York marriage. The only difference is I need a visa to visit my wife. And you know, certain things happen, we have no idea why it happens, at what time it happens. My interest in Israel began with the Lebanon War, the first one. So from 1982 until today, almost more than half my life, I'm not as old as I look. So this is only in India, unless you look older, people don't respect you. So initially I started dyeing in the white rather than in the black so that I have a respectability. I'm wondering at this stage, maybe I need to carry a walking stick in a few years time so that, you know, I get more respect. That's all it is. So for almost 36 years, we worked. But if you look at anything to do with Israel, or the Palestinian question, or the Arab-Israeli conflict in India, you will find one statement of Gandhi. It says Palestine belongs to the Arabs, like England to the English, and France to the French. You will never find any article, seminal work, academic discussion without this quotation. And if you look at from that, you ask a question, is it so? So that's what I really wanted to start as part of my research. My doctoral thesis was on India's Israel policy. That's what it was published in Columbia recently, almost 20 years after I got my doctorate. And therefore you ask a question, what is Gandhi's position? You need to demystify a number of things about Gandhi. And personally, it was extremely difficult for me to write the book. Because if you don't like Gandhi, if you hate Gandhi, it's much easier. You can tear him to pieces. But I grew up admiring him as a child, and I still consider he is one of the very few human beings who tried to narrow the gap between what he preached and what he practiced. You cannot find people in these days, you can't even imagine them. At least he tried. He may not have succeeded always, but at least he made an enormous effort that he should actually live up to his own words. So taking Gandhi closely was not an easy task. But I said, okay, but when you do it, you get strength from nowhere else except Gandhi. Gandhi said, truthful. So it is the truthfulness which Gandhi admired, I decided to take the work. So it took me about 3 years to get the book, and the book just came about end of October. What do you see? There are certain things that are very, very clear. Gandhi never understood Judaism. He never understood Zionism. And therefore, he never was able to comprehend How come a group of people were trying to form a homeland in Palestine? He was not able to understand. This is how the larger implications were. We will go one by one and then decipher it. His understanding of Judaism was primarily through the Christian prism. He actually makes a reference that, or the Jews were not accused of being responsible for the death of Christ. He makes a reference. And he had been to the synagogue a couple of times in South Africa. He said, I was not very impressed by that. It was only, there is nothing spiritual about it. I was not attracted towards it. And Gandhi studied other religious faiths. He is not an atheist or a non-religious person. And he was always talking about religion. And if you don't understand Judaism, he never understood the Jewish history also. Because if you don't understand the Jewish history, you will not understand why a group of people were looking for a homeland in Palestine. He was not able to make a complete link. But when you look at his collected works, there are 100 volumes, each one running about 400 to 500 pages. Yeah. If you look at all the things, all his letters, correspondence, speeches, interviews, everything is there. Almost everything. We'll come to that why the almost part. And if you look at it, you will find Jews in almost every volume. If a person doesn't understand the Indian demographic reality, by looking at Gandhi, you will say Jews must be a very large community in India. He talks about Hindus, Muslims, and the Jews. He talks Christians somewhat less. He makes very little reference to Buddhists or the Sikhs in India. So you will actually assume Jews are the third largest community in India after the Hindus and the Muslims. This is not the case. If you look at historically, the first Jewish presence in India was traced to the first century after Christ, shortly after the destruction of the Second Temple. So while the Jews had a continuous existence in India, their presence in India was extremely small. Between the two wars, there were about 30,000 Jews. Most of them were refugees fleeing from Europe. And today, according to the latest census, the number of Jews in India is just over 4,000. 4,000 in a population of 1.2 billion. I think that's the ground reality. So, why you ask a question? If this is the case, why did Gandhi regularly talk about Jews in all his volumes, in prayers and speeches? The reason is, he had Jews as one of the closest friends when he was in South Africa. He had a number of friends. Two are most important. One is Herman Kallenberg. The other one is Pollock. These are the two people with whom he worked in South Africa before he came to India in 1914, just at the outset of the First World War. What they were doing? Gandhi established the kibbutz type communal farming on a land belonging to Herman Kallenberg. The Kallenberg said, I have a land, you establish a farm. This is where Gandhi established what he called it ashram, Leo Tolstoy model. He established it. So he and Gandhi, Herman Kallenberg and Gandhi were extremely close friends. They used to correspond. You are the upper house, I'm the lower house, that's the British bicameral parliament. That is how they dealt with each other. The other person is Pollock. But Pollock's role was, he was a friend of Gandhi, but the more important was, the Indian nationalists knew about Gandhi's activities in South Africa through Pollock. Gandhi was struggling in South Africa for the rights of the Indians. Pollock went and reported to the Indian nationalists, you know what Gandhi's achievements were. So the Indian nationalists came to know about Gandhi and his political success in South Africa primarily through Pollock. Gandhi is not an ordinary person. This is what he has done by new non-violent struggle. So by the time Gandhi came to India in 1914 from South Africa, Indian nationalists have a great opinion because Gandhi was coming on the basis of the success in South Africa in fighting for the Indians and other people. through non-violent struggle. So this is how the relationship begins. So the prolonged association of Jews with Gandhi was the only reason why you find them in almost all the volumes of Gandhi, even though Jews were not living in India in large numbers. Even though these two people are close to Gandhi, their understanding of Judaism was almost non-existent. They were not practicing Jews. Pollock actually married a Christian. So if you look at it, therefore, these people, though they were closer to Gandhi, they fought with Gandhi, they participated in all the anti-colonial struggle in South Africa, but they were not able to communicate the nuances of Judaism to Gandhi. So Gandhi only understood Judaism through the Christian prism. He never went beyond that, and Kallenberg and Pollock could not actually help in that matter. So at the outset of the First World War, Gandhi was coming back to India. And since he was very close to Kallenberg, Kallenberg said, let's go together, come with me. So both of them traveled to England, and Gandhi wrote a letter to the British Home Office saying that, yes, I know Kallenberg for the last 15 years, we worked together, comrades now, please give him a visa to India. Kallenberg was a German national at that time. The British said, you are an enemy alien. So not only they did not give him visa, they put him in jail, sent him to Cyprus. So Gandhi had to go back to India without Kallenberg. So from 1915 to 1937, they were only communicating, they never met him, until Kallenberg comes to India in 1937. This is the personal story. So even though they were Jews, they never understood the Jewish history. If this is not enough, sometime around 1913, Kallenberg got an offer that why don't you come to Palestine and live there? So Kallenberg asked Gandhi, what should I do? Gandhi said, what are you going to do in Palestine? You'll probably do a better job sitting in South Africa rather than going to Palestine. If you look at 1913, not many Jews were Zionists at that point. This was 4 years before Balfour Declaration. So Kallenberg said yes, very much yes. Because he was not a practicing person, he decided, thank you very much, I'm happy in South Africa. It was only after Gandhi left South Africa, Kallenberg was gradually attracted towards Zionism. So when Gandhi left South Africa in 1914, Kallenberg was not even a Jew in the real sense of the word. When he met Gandhi in 1937, he has become a Zionist. That's a transition has taken. So by that time, this is the personal transition you will find. If he did not understand Judaism, everything, when he comes to India, that was right at the onset of the First World War. If you look at the First World War, in the Middle East, we had a large empire called the Ottoman Empire. And the British were fighting the Ottoman Empire. And that is where Palestine comes into picture. Palestine has been under the Islamic rule from 637, when the armies of second Caliph Omar captured Jerusalem. It is only after that you have the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which in Islamic theology, the third holiest place in Islam. Which basically meant Al-Aqsa today stands on a pre-Islamic, non-Islamic, un-Islamic structure. Theologically, by history, geography, whatever way you want to look at it. If you look at the First World War, it created a lot of tension among the Indian Muslims. Because Islam came to India in the 7th century, shortly after the death of Prophet Muhammad. And Islam dominated the northern part of India. We had a Mughal Empire, which continued until the arrival of the British. Even though the Muslims lost the empire in that sense, they were not unduly worried because there are other empires around. But in the First World War time, the last remaining Islamic empire was the Ottoman Empire. So when the British launched a war against the Ottomans, suddenly the Indian Muslims recognized we only have one Islamic empire, even that is under threat. Because until such time, the Indian Muslims are nowhere interested in the office of Caliph. If you are familiar, the office of Caliph came short immediately after the death of Prophet Muhammad. Because suddenly people recognized we need somebody to lead the community. While individualism is very great, we all believe that we need a leader. We also need Sabha to run the institute, right? Why can't everybody run it? No, we need a director. So we always need somebody. From Moses' time till today, you need a leader to lead the people. It was in that context you have an office of Caliph. But if you look at it in the 19th, at the beginning of the First World War, the Caliph was held by the Ottoman Sultan. So the ruler of Ottoman Empire was both a spiritual leader and a temporal leader. He was the Sultan, he was also the Caliph. So Indian Muslims looked at him, the British were attacking not only the Ottoman Sultan, but also the Caliph of the Sunni Muslims. And suddenly they said, no, Islam in danger became the war cry. We need to rally, we need to protest, we need to fight against the British who are ruling India. That is what it is. So it was in that circumstance that Gandhi returns to India, comes to India and enters Indian politics. At that time, the Indian National Congress was leading the anti-British campaign. But if you look at it, it was Indian and national only in the name. Because much of the Congress party was dominated by Hindus. The Muslim presence in the Congress party was extremely small. Gandhi recognized, I need Muslims to join the Congress party. And for that, the struggle among the Indian Muslims in defense of the Ottoman Sultan, which is called the Khilafat struggle, is an opportunity. So by supporting the Muslims in the fight against the British in the Ottoman Empire, I'm going to enlist their support for the Congress. It's a trade-off. This is how Gandhi viewed the Khilafat struggle, which is a pan-Islamic struggle. They were fighting for the Ottoman Sultan hundreds and thousands of miles away. For Gandhi, he said, okay, by supporting the Muslims of India, I'm going to enlist them for the anti-British struggle. This is how Gandhi pledged the Congress party to supporting the Khilafat movement. And it was in that period Gandhi's first statements on Palestine can be noticed. It is not the Congress party. It is not Nehru. It is not even the Muslim leaders who said anything. It was Gandhi who first said, the Jews and the Christians can go to Palestine, they can visit Palestine, they can even reside in Palestine, but they can't have sovereign rights. This is the Gandhi's first statement, more than anybody else. Others actually followed it subsequently. He was the first one to say yes. And he framed the Palestine question not in anti-imperial struggle, no. He framed it within the Islamic symbolism. For his understanding, Palestine has been under the Islamic rule from the 7th century until today, until the British arrival in December 1970, Allen-based troops. So therefore, it is an Islamic territory and it will stay as Islamic. This is how Gandhi viewed it. And more formal statement came in 1921. This was actually 17 years before the 1938 statement, Palestine belonged to the Arabs. No, that came much later. So he framed the Palestine question not as an anti-imperial, anti-colonial struggle, no. He placed it within the Islamic history and claims. And he talks about the injunctions of Prophet. That is Prophet Muhammad. Subsequently, he recognized, yes, if you believe in injunctions of Prophet, you have to go back a few millennium earlier, it was promised to the Jews. But had he understood the Judaism, he would have actually said, yes, Prophet Muhammad promised, but it is already promised to somebody else centuries ago. So therefore, whose promise you are going to believe? The person who promised first or the person who came later? So Gandhi would have asked that question. But his understanding of Judaism was limited, therefore he never even raised that point. He simply said, Prophet Muhammad promised, so therefore. But if you look at it, more than any other Indian leader, it was Gandhi who captured the real story. If you look at today, this is what the entire Islamic claim is. Why is it that not many Islamic countries actually recognize Israel? Why do they talk about the vast property in the Hamas charter? And secular and others did not understand. It was Gandhi who captured them. Yes, this belongs to them. And subsequently you have all the developments. When once you frame it within the Islamic paradigm, there is no compromise. You simply have to accept the basic things. And if you look at it, you use the word Jazirat al-Arab, which is an Arabic word, which is translated as Arabian Peninsula or the island of Arabia. He said Palestine is part of Jazirat al-Arab. That is how the Indian Muslim League was talking. Gandhi accepted the term. But we know that the term Arabian Peninsula does not even include Iraq. But in the 1920s, the Indian leaders and Indian community was accepting not only the Arabian Peninsula, they are including Palestine, including Istanbul as part of Jazirat al-Arab. I am not so sure if the Ottoman Sultan would like the idea that, Istanbul is part of Jazirat al-Arab. But that is how the Indian leaders understood and explained. Gandhi said it is part of the Jazirat al-Arab and therefore it will have to stay in the Islamic rule. So when he made the statement in 1938, it was largely a continuation of that. There is an interesting thing about the 1938 statement, Palestine belonged to the Arabs. It was written a couple of days after Kristallnacht. So I often ask a question, why can't Gandhi say Palestine belonged to the Arabs like Germany belongs to the Germans? Why can't he write it? Because had he written that, he would have understood the impossibility of the situation. By bringing in France and Britain, it's easy. Why don't they say, okay, it belongs to German, belongs to the Germans? Because the moment you write that, you recognize that that's not the reality. So Gandhi is settled for much larger thing. And if you look at the statements, few things come out clearly for us. He said the Jews should follow non-violence. And in the article he says, he was talking about non-violence against Hitler. That is, when he was told, Jews practice non-violence, he said, no, this is not the non-violence of the weak. I don't even want in the thinking you should have violence. Absolute it in every sense of the word. That's Gandhi, whatever we know. No issues, fine. But if you look at the same article, a few paragraphs down, he says, I know there is violence in Palestine. I wish the Arabs could actually use non-violence. But given the overwhelming odds facing the Arabs, I can understand Arab violence. He actually said it. So the same person who in the earlier stages talks about Jewish non-violence against Hitler comes up and says, I understand the Arab violence because they are facing overwhelming odds. You're talking about 1938, after Kristallnacht. And that tells you he was not able to comprehend the magnitude of the problem. When somebody wrote to him, yeah, you can say Gandhi, you can say all of them sitting in British India. If there is a German Gandhi, you would have been shot in 5 minutes. So you not even, British kept you, put you in jail on all of them, but you would have been dead in 5 minutes time. But he even said, even then, that doesn't change my position. You ask a question, how is it that Gandhi demanded Jewish non-violence, but he did not do the same thing to the Arabs in Palestine? There is only one explanation I can think of. Probably Gandhi thought he can influence the Jews, or probably Arabs will not listen to him. That's the only explanation I can come up with. Otherwise, why would he not say, okay, Arabs should also use non-violence to reach your goals? He's not able to do that in that sense. The second part he talks about was, if the Jews wanted to achieve their goals, they should do it through dialogue with the Arabs, not to confront with them. If you look at it, Gandhi always looked at a negotiated settlement. He was not the realist in that sense. He never wanted people to resort to violence and solve the problems. There is nothing wrong in that. The only problem was, for the Indian intellectuals, they only quote this Gandhi's position. Gandhi was not happy with the Jews getting support from the British and the Americans to achieve their goals in Palestine. Once again, if you take a moral high ground, fine. I have no issues with that. But around the same time, a section of the Indian leadership was seeking help from Germany and Japan to fight the British. Same time. So, if a collaboration with British is a reason for Gandhi criticizing the Zionist leadership, you should use the same logic that, collaboration with Germany and Japan at that time to fight the British is equally wrong. To the best of my knowledge, no Indian leader has ever criticized this kind of collaboration. So they picked up Gandhi to criticize the Zionist leadership, but his criticism on other issues, no, let's not talk about it, because he's an Indian, because they fought the British, so we are all fighting, only people adopted different means, so it's okay, it's legitimate. So you more or less come to accept that, it's like saying, if somebody comes late, why are you late? If this person is my brother, okay, I understand. So you have a duality towards that. That's exactly. So if Jews cannot collaborate with a third party, if an Indian leader collaborates, I can understand it. I think that is kind of things is visible not just in Gandhi, but in much higher level. The problem is not just Gandhi. If Gandhi was, if you look at it, a person of so many things, if everything he said is right, he would be better than Moses. The fact that he was not able to do it, that's why he's still Gandhi, not a prophet. So we accept the limitations of individuals. The problem is not just Gandhi. And if you look at it, a number of critical meetings, information is not available in the entire collected works of Mahatma Gandhi. You have 100 volumes, almost 50,000 pages. There are few interesting things which are not there. Before we go to that, just a small thing. While Gandhi was making statement about Palestine from 1919, just around the First World War time, the first Zionist contact with Gandhi did not happen until 1931. Gandhi was not important. It is only in 1931 a Jewish Zionist executive leaders met Gandhi in London. The reason was Palestine should be kept away from the Indian domestic politics. Gandhi said, yes, I also want to keep away, but in reality he couldn't do it. If you look at it from 1920, all the Gandhi statements were almost contextualized within the evolving tension in India between the Khilafat movement and the struggle between Indian National Congress and the Muslim League. It was in that context all his statements were evolving. Gandhi said. Once Gandhi said yes, the Zionist leadership forgot him. The second contact came in 1936. Once again, after the Arab revolt in Palestine, they said, okay, we need some sort of damage control in India. Okay, you send Olswanger. Olswanger met all the Indian leaders. Almost 3 months he was in India, including Gandhi he met. And when he went back, once again there is a silence. While the Zionist leadership was talking to all the foresight mechanism, there was no direct personal contact between the Zionist leadership and Gandhi. Top level, none. And even Nehru, who was the main architect of Indian foreign policy, there was no letter between the Zionist leadership and Nehru until 1947. India did not figure in the Zionist diplomacy. Understandable. Because if you look at it, as Ben-Gurion said, when we talk about the world, we are only talking about the world where the Jews lived in large number or where their lives were in danger. In the Indian case, India never had a large number of Jews, and Jews were never in danger in India. Today we talk about anti-Semitism in all over the world, how many countries are increasing, decreasing, all sorts of things. The term anti-Semitism was alien to Indian culture. We did not know what it means. The 2000 years of history, Jews never had a persecution but any stretch of imagination. So if you look at it, all the European countries suddenly talks about human rights. Every one of them. Go back and find out 70 years ago. The level of human rights. And the US is also, if you look at the Holocaust Museum in United States, is very nice. All the thing. They should actually put up the main entrance should be Auschwitz, right? The first liberation took place, but that's by the Russians, so no, we can't do it. We need some American one so that it's an American national emblem. That's what it is. The US role on the Holocaust is not very clean either. So today everybody talking about things, but in Indian context, anti-Semitism was actually alien to that. And I think that's what it is. So India never figured, because it was neither a large number nor a danger area. So Zionist diplomacy never even talked about India. It never figured in that. Okay. Within this context, you had few meetings which surprisingly you don't find them in the collected works of Gandhi. 1931 meeting between the Zionist executive and Gandhi in London. Old Swangers meeting with Gandhi in September 1936. The meeting between the Jewish delegation from Hebrew University which attended the Asian Relations Conference in 1947. If this is not enough, when Kallenberg met him after 23 years, Gandhi gave him a statement. An undated, unsigned statement, which he thought will actually mediate and find a settlement. You don't find them in any of the public information in the 100 volumes. Then you ask a question, if one or two information is missing, I understand. Gandhi was meticulous in whatever he wrote. You may disagree with him, you may question him, but he was meticulous in whatever he wrote, whatever he did. He put it in public domain. His ignorance and familiarity and everything. He was not a realist, but he put everything in public domain. But if that is the case, if a number of things are missing, you ask, is it accidental or somebody deliberately removed it? So I'm looking at it most probably the second case. Because Gandhi did not say anything on the Holocaust. Not a word. There is no statement of Gandhi even after 45. There is only one passage. It's impossible Gandhi was keeping quiet. No. Gandhi is not worried about consistency. Yesterday I said, today he's not worried about that. Because people who are worried about generally, it's like a model, developing a model. Normally what do? We develop a model, pick a few cases, whatever case doesn't fit in us, we simply remove them. That's what you do. All the model development is that. We only pick up the suitable model so that we can justify our theories. That's what we do academic full time. It's not that the examples lead to a theory, but the theory picks up the model. That's what we do it full time. If you take some other example, my theory goes for a 6. So Gandhi is not that. Which means somebody systematically removed whatever Gandhi was saying, which did not fall in line with the mainstream thinking. Gandhi was consistently opposed to the Zionism, which is not. If you look at in the later time, after 38, Gandhi was saying, Jews have a good case. They have a prayer claim to Palestine than the Muslims. They have a legitimate position. And he says, the only thing I demand is talk to the Arabs and negotiate. That's what he was saying. In other words, he was not questioning the goal. He was only questioning the means to achieve it. He's not a Machiavellian. End justifies the mean. No. He said, I agree with the mean, but can you find a better? So all the things were there after 38. But unfortunately, the Gandhi followers in India find, no, if I quote this, you cannot say Gandhi was consistently opposed to Zionism. You can't make the case. The Zionists also ignored Gandhi. After this statement, it's too little, too late for me. With the result, both of them did not pay attention. But when you look at it, one of the secretaries of Gandhi, who was with him in the last 15 years of Gandhi's life, and subsequently was leading the 100-volume compilation, told a journalist, saying that, I removed some of the opinions of Gandhi, because I was the only one privy to this, it will go to the grave with me. The people ask, which one you are talking about? On Israel. By the way, by the time Gandhi was killed, Israel was not even there. Israel came a few months after. But he said, okay, I systematically suppressed all Gandhi's opinion on Israel. Which basically means, Gandhi was actually tailored, like you do the garden, you trim all the trees, looks like as if it's like Kumar rather than an actual a tree. You trimmed everything which is not suitable. And therefore, my understanding of the whole thing is, not only Gandhi did not understand Judaism and Zionism and the linkage, his opinions were systematically altered. Gandhi talked about truthfulness, and his disciples were not that. And we are actually left with a situation that there is a lot opinion Gandhi said which was not in agreement with everything, but which was slightly diluted from his position, very hardcore argument. So you ask a question, why the squaring the circle? So, from India recognized Israel in September 1950. Incidentally, it's 17 September, the day our present Prime Minister was born. It was on that day India recognized Israel. You promised a normalization. When Walter Reitan, the Director General in the Israeli Foreign Ministry, comes to Delhi in March 1952, Nehru tells him, yes, we will normalize relations, right in the middle of the elections, we will do it. It did not happen, or it happened after 40 years. So we normalized relations in 92. So when there were no diplomatic relations with Israel, you can use Gandhi. Gandhi said, Palestine belongs to the Arab, therefore we don't have relations. You can use Gandhi to justify the absence of diplomatic relations. You can even say it's Gandhian not to have relations with Israel. Fair enough. The moment you normalize relations, because you justified, you have used Gandhi for 40 years, you ask a question, if non-relation is Gandhian, is relations not un-Gandhian? Are you dilating or moving away from Gandhi? Nobody answered question. And people pretended the 1938 statement and the 1992 decisions are actually happening in two different worlds. They never even questioned. If you use Gandhi to justify the absence of relations, how do you use Gandhi to explain the relation which is happening today? So the problem is not just Gandhi. The whole approach towards understanding him. In 2015, India, the first Indian president to visit Israel, Palestine and Jordan was Pranab Mukherjee. He first went to Jordan, then he went to Palestine, then he went to Israel. In Amman, he says, Gandhi said Palestine belonged to the Arabs. 2015. If that's the case, within 24 hours he went to Palestine, he went to Ramallah, he went to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem he says, we and you fought against the same British. I was wondering, as a student of the subject, one often wonders, you don't even look at the calendar. So how do you explain 38 position Gandhi, quote Gandhi, with what's happening today? And that's That's what it is. So even the diplomats, the politicians, academics, they simply don't quote anything. They don't even ask a question, how is it that Gandhi talked about Hitler should be fought non-violently, but the Palestinian Arabs can use violence? You don't even, as an academic, you should question it. Why? The same article is not even the same article, the first paragraph and the 10th paragraph. There's a huge dichotomy. So the problem is not Gandhi. As we said, Gandhi is not Moses. Even Moses also a transmitter, right? He didn't write the 10 Commandments. He only carried it. It was given to him. So he's not a prophet in that sense of the word. But people should question. Because if you don't question, a lot of things simply, you live in a stereotype world and forget, okay, this is what it is. It's not. So what I tried to do was, can you actually square the circle? And we know that if you square it, it won't be a circle. I think I'll stop at this point of time. If there is any questions, I'm more than happy to answer. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Hello, thank you for very, very informative words. My question is following. Is India of 2015 the same as India of 2018? You stop at 2015. Has something changed since then? And number two, do we have a trace of those writings of Gandhi which have been simply put away?
Well, what is it?
The writings of Gandhi which has been simply buried or ignored, do we have a trace of them?
Okay, the second part, to the best of my knowledge, no. So what are the actual statements of Gandhi which was censored? We absolutely don't. The only thing is, Pyarelal made a public statement, yes, I suppressed Gandhi's statement. That's the only thing we have got. What exactly he did, we absolutely have no clues. That's number one. 2015 in the sense, the only reason I mentioned was that's the statement by the Indian president. The Indian president's statements are normally choreographed by the cabinet, which means Modi's government. So in the sense, this is the context in which I said. People don't, even when the book was released by the present vice president a few weeks ago, he was talking about all the books, this book talks about this, and he was giving all the explanation. And he said, Kumaraswamy wrote a book on India's policy towards, on the squaring the circle. He only mentioned the title of the book. And I understand that. I understand because, if I'm an anti-Gandhi, it's much easier. Okay, Kumar came with an agenda, he was actually taking on Gandhi, he was making a sacrilege, blasphemy and everything. You can't put me in that category. So at one level, it's like a Gentile criticizing Israel and a Jewish person criticizing Israel. Gentile means you are an anti-Semite, matter ends. But how do you put a Jewish person criticizing Israel? How do you bracket him? So therefore, that's a kind of dilemma they face. If it is somebody else, they would have called me blasphemous or something. So with the result, it's, I'm just only capturing it. It's, at least Gandhi and Israel, people don't want to talk about it. Because, it puts Gandhi in a very negative light. And because my argument was, I actually wrote in one of the places, Gandhi the politician prevailed over Gandhi the Mahatma. At least on the Palestine question. Rest of the things I don't know. But at least on this one, even Gandhi is not infallible. That's the only thing I recognize. Beyond that, it's not, he was there. Everybody was criticizing me in other one, but they couldn't take the book to on the top. Okay, what you are saying is wrong. They couldn't say that.
Thank you.
Professor Kumar, I'm fascinated and unbelievably disillusioned once again, as I think we all are with politicians in general, but I sort of never had Gandhi in exactly the same box. Anyway, when you were doing your research and you realized that a man that I would imagine you thought was quite a bright, thoughtful, intellectually curious human being, Gandhi, and he never bothered to even have any sense of Judaism, how did this impact you? You were doing your research, you were young, and obviously had respect for the man, as I did previously. It's sort of mind-bending. We're not talking about somebody like Trump who doesn't read, or doesn't question, or doesn't think. This is Mahatma Gandhi.
Don't get me ready, I have to go back tomorrow. You put me into trouble, I'm not saying anything on that. Gandhi, yes, not others. You know, I still respect Gandhi. No, I know that's what they think. I'm not simply changing into the other. No, I'm not. I still respect Gandhi because, as I said, at least he tried. How many of us will try? Can you tell me one person you know who tried and failed? But the only thing I noticed was, when it comes to Palestine, that is his Achilles' heels. That's his greatest weakness. That's what it is. The greatest weakness of Gandhi I found out when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict. And that's largely because there is nobody to tell him, hey, look at the history. He never had an opportunity to study. He never started. That's what it is. His lack of understanding of the faith, lack of understanding of the history, and therefore he was not able to link. Till the end he believed Jews as a religious people. But he never taught them it is also a national people. He didn't understand. That's what the fundamental problem was. He looked at them as a religious people. And in the Indian context, it had an extra thing. Because Pakistani nationalism was logic was, Muslims are a different religion, therefore they need a different nation, therefore they need a different country. So Indian leaders, not just Gandhi, even all the others, they said, you may follow a different religion, that doesn't mean you are a different nation. Because the moment you accept the logic, India will have 1,000 countries. Every religion, every caste will have a separate religion. Where do you draw the line? So the Indian nationalism was an inclusive one. Everybody. So in the same logic was extended to Palestine. That's what it is. So when you look at the Jews as a religious community, I also have a problem about Sikhs and Buddhists and all the others. So, and I think that's the difficulty of the context. Gandhi never able to look at them as a nation. The moment you take them as a nation, your logic is different. And they were not able to do that. Translation was not possible. And also, let's be very, there are only 4,000 Jews.
Right.
Under the British, India had the largest Muslim population in the world. Today we have the second largest Muslim population after Indonesia. That's a ground reality. I never met a Jewish person until 3 years after my research. Because I need to apply for a visa. That was the first time I met a Jewish person in my life. My doctoral thesis was somewhere I started in 84. I met a Jewish person in 87. So you explain to me. Suppose if I had to wait for a Jewish person to tell me work on the subject, I would wait eternity. So that is a ground reality. Maybe if the number was large, Gandhi would have been. But Kallenberg and Thing, he spent 20 years with them, and both of them had no clues about Judaism. So if they don't know about Judaism, how do you expect Gandhi to know about it? You tell me. These are all contexts in which it evolved.
And now would you say that your colleagues or the people that you have an opportunity to dialogue with in India, are you well received?
This is the question people ask, how was the book received? My standard answer is, once I finish a book, I go to the next one. Because if I'm stuck with that, I won't be able to do it. Yesterday I didn't go anywhere in Montreal because I was reading the manuscript of my next book. So therefore, when received, I just write it and leave it. I don't go beyond that. Because, you are living for tomorrow. Otherwise, you are stuck in yesterday means nothing happens. So you ask me the next book, I'll do that. But this one, I'll leave it.
Thank you.
You said that before the creation of Israel, Gandhi advocated that the Jews should use non-violent methods against Hitler. And he also said that he understood Muslim violence in Palestine. I was wondering, how are the majority Hindus dealing with the 230 million Muslims in today's India? Is there any contradiction, or do they follow Gandhi's beliefs?
Gandhi was making the statement in the context of Palestine. As Islam goes away from the Middle East, is rather different. And if you'll find it in Washington. If you walk around the main city, you will certainly find a Saraswati. In India, in Hindu mythology, is a goddess of wisdom or knowledge. You will find the Saraswati statue in front of the Indonesian embassy. It's there in Washington. So the moment Islam leaves the Middle East, it is different from what you see in the heartland. And maybe Dar al-Harb. So in Dar al-Harb, Islam is a different one. But in the Indian context, we are talking about 1.2 billion people, about 170 million Muslims. So therefore, in Israel, 2 Israelis, 3 political parties, right?
5.
Okay, or maybe 4, right? These days, I don't know. So that is why it is. So you cannot simply stereotype about 170 million people or 1.2 billion Indians. No way you can do that. But what I could say that, at least the bulk of the majority are different. For instance, in very not long ago, my boss and my colleague and my student, large number of them are Muslims. And I think that is, one of the uniqueness of India. I'm not going to say my gardener is a Muslim. No, I'm saying my boss is a Muslim. So that is a kind of advantage one gets. And as long as India stays that way, we can exist as a country. The moment we get into this, I'm different from you, we are out.
And this is not happening in India now?
No.
In what sense?
No, there's no animosity between Hindus.
Animosity is there. I'm not going to deny that. But it's not as prominent and tense as you think, because you need to exist on a daily basis. So there is a tension is there occasionally. It's not that I'm not going to whitewashing doesn't help anybody. But it exists. But it's not that something insurmountable. It's not something, I can't sit next to a Muslim. No such thing. I don't think we have got to that point.
Thank you very much for your wonderful, brilliant talk. I really enjoyed it. And I come from a very unusual perspective, having been to India on a Jewish tour of India. I think I've been to every synagogue in India. Of course, they're not functioning as synagogues, but I really got a full history of the Jews in India, and in the context, of course, of world history in India. So that's one thing. But on the other hand, I also went to Gandhi's home. And the one thing that really impressed me, I'm walking through the house and you see his correspondence, and he actually has a letter that he wrote to Hitler, complaining and asking him not to harm the Jews. You're probably aware of that. Can you kind of comment on that?
This was, just before the war. If you look at it, even in the article I refer to, it talks about, if there is a war which can be justified, a war against Hitler is justifiable. He did say that in the same 1938 letter. But still, I will not advocate war.
But why does he actually believed that Hitler would listen to him when he wrote a letter to Hitler, asking him to change his ways? I mean, this is what
that's Gandhi for you.
Impressed me about Gandhi and the way he was thinking.
So he thought that, he actually wrote a few times, you can even melt the heart of Hitler. You can say with the history, you can say naively he believed it. You can say that.
He must have believed it because
that's what I'm saying.
He sent that letter.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. You can question the wisdom of his statement. But the conviction, yes, that's what it is. And that's what I refer to the track record of Britain and European countries in the Second World War, simply because of that. They had the power to do it. They didn't.
They didn't.
Exactly, they had the power to do it.
They didn't speak up.
Exactly, they had the power to change.
That's right.
And if you look at it, in 1947, after all the things, there is a US Congressman, Emanuel Seller. He was writing to Nehru, please give asylum to Jews from Afghanistan. They were already staying in India, extend that time. Nehru was saying, and third time Nehru was saying, why can't Seller write to his own government in Washington? Why is he troubling us? So Seller could ask Nehru to action. Why can't you write to Vice President? Hey, give me more. No, that's what I'm saying. So we know the track record, but eventually you have to come to terms with history. They will. It's the same thing. Hiroshima, somebody had to come and apologize, right? It's not going to die. It may not be today, tomorrow, maybe 100 years from today. Somebody have to say, sorry. We killed innocent people. So, question of time. So that is the con. Gandhi honestly believed by writing to Hitler, he can actually have the empathy part. Hey guys, please. You can say naive, but he believed in that. And similarly, he said, dear Hitler. His letter begins with dear Hitler. And a lot of people took offense. How can he say dear Hitler? Then what do you write? How do you write? Tell me, better way. That is what English language teaches you, no? Even whether you say Haver, whether you believe or not, that's how you address a person, right? How do you have it? So Gandhi actually wrote dear Hitler, which people took offense. How do you write like that?
Thank you.
Fascinating talk. A couple of things. I always thought that the lack of political or diplomatic relations between Israel and India was mostly a function of Nehru's wanting to be head of the Third World Congress, Third World Unalignment, yeah, exactly. And Israel, especially after '67, didn't fit in. And I also thought that Nehru channeled a lot of the anti-Semitism that was quite prominent in aristocratic and upper-class England. That even though he was fighting against the British, he picked up those kinds of attitudes. And also the kind of inconsistency was that Israel for a long time was part of the Socialist League of the United Nations until it got kicked out. Now, the other thing was, I read a long time ago that there was actually some correspondence between Gandhi and Martin Buber, right? But the British censored it. They stopped the letters from being delivered. And I'm just wondering if that figures into, any of your research.
Okay, thanks. If you look at, only day before yesterday, Michael Bridger I had a conversation with him. I know you must be familiar. He's from the McGill University. He wrote about Nehru's biography and others. And he actually met Nehru's in the 50s and 60s personally. And he said that, no, you can criticize Nehru on so many things, you can't call him anti-Semite. So, but to the best of my knowledge, I don't see anything on you are right about the British aristocrat. We are finding it in the Labour Party leader also in trouble because of that. So we know that. So that's going to be the case. But going back to the 1952, when Walter Retan met Nehru promised normalization. So we will send an embassy. He's actually asked his ministry to work out the budget, but it never happened. The reason was simple. It seems that he brought the matter to the cabinet, and Nehru's cabinet colleague, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, who was a Congress president during the Second World War, he gave two reasons. If you have relations with Israel, Pakistan will use it against India in the Arab world. Because Arab world was important for historical, economical, cultural and all the reasons. The second reason was, if you normalize relations, Muslims in India will feel hurt. Already they are hurt by the partition and the riots and the violence and everything. They will become much more difficult for them. Nehru seemed to accept both the arguments. There was no contradiction from that. But the Muslims will oppose Indian normalization. It is the perception of the Indian elite. To the best of my knowledge, I never found any survey or study or anything to say, yes, if you normalize relations with Israel, Muslims will be opposed to India. No, I never found any scientific study on it. But this is how the Indian elites perceive. So then you ask a question, when you normalize relation in 1992, Pakistan was still there, the Muslims are still there. Nothing happened. And therefore you come with a different, okay, Muslims have an opinion. If you look at it, Muslims in India are a minority in the Indian population, irrespective of the 170 million. But still they are a minority in India. But if you're a minority in a country, you can influence the policy, you can't dictate it. The moment you dictate a policy, you alienate the majority from you. So therefore, that is my understanding. So these are the reasons. 63rd non-alignment comes much later. Nehru makes a statement in 1956. After the Suez crisis, Nehru was angry not with the Israeli attacking Egypt. No, that's not Nehru's problem. Nehru's problem was Israel collaborated with Britain and France. They are an imperial power, they still have a colonies, you collaborated with them. That's what upset Nehru. And therefore Nehru says, time is not right for normalization. Shortly after the Suez crisis. And third world, yes, but the basic argument was Pakistan and the Indian war. On the Buber correspondence. Okay, normally we use the word correspondence. Correspondence presupposes you write, other person reply. From what we know, after the 1938 article, Martin Buber and his colleague, okay, let me come to that. Okay, they wrote a long letter to Gandhi. So what we know is, Gandhi's secretary said, we got the letter, Gandhi is not here, I am forwarding it to place, I don't know when Gandhi will read it. That is the last message on the subject. We never know, there is no evidence to suggest that Gandhi actually read what Buber wrote. There is no evidence to suggest. I don't know about the British part, but what we know is there is no. So therefore, sometimes people say Buber, Gandhi correspondence. I find it now, Buber wrote, yes. Gandhi never replied. The reply came only from his secretary who said, I'm forwarding it to another place, I don't know when Gandhi will read. Because you're talking about just before the war, 1938, 39, early 39, and Gandhi was traveling, and shortly after that he was arrested. So therefore, or it could be possible that secretary did not do the what? Because the person who wrote a letter was Pierre Elard, who was actually subsequently said, I kept Gandhi's material away. It could be done both at the lower end. I'm not so sure about the British one. I wouldn't go that far.
Thank you.
I have a little connection with Dr. Kumaraswamy knows. I was with the United Nations in 1960 at the border of Israel and Egypt in Gaza Strip. And we came to know that this war, this trouble was going right from 1920 onwards. And the Arabs never accepted Jews. And it is true, and I'm not anti-Islamic, but they never negotiate when the question comes of religions. That is true. That is why Pakistan has come, and that is why Israel is not accepted, because they never negotiate. If I am right or wrong, Gandhi was quite right in saying you negotiate. So that is the problem. That today it is 2018. That is from 1920, 2018, this problem is still there. All of you academics should consider this. There's no settlement. Why? Because they don't talk. That's why.
I would put it slightly differently. As an academic, you need to come with an interesting logic. Islam looks at the Jews as a dhimmi. Dhimmi, people of the book. Dhimmi. Ahl al-Kitab. That is people of the book. That is, Islam recognizes Judaism and Christianity because it predates Islam and Islam is derived from them. In return, which means Jews ought to be protected. That is the Islamic theological argument. Protection is different from equality. Protection was a virtue in the 7th century when people have been killed. So when Islam came, you said under the argument, the Jews can retain their religion, their life and the property. In those times, property included women and children. And that was a revolutionary in 7th century, because at that point of time, you have to change your religion or you die. Islam kept the Jews, okay, you accept your religion, you can keep your religion because you are predates Islam, the same Abrahamic faith. But in return, you have to accept the supremacy of Islam. So as long as you accept Islamic supremacy, your lives and property will be protected. Yeah. This is a condition in which Islam tolerated Judaism and Christianity, historically. But, one second, sir, just let me finish. The problem is, when Zionism came, they did not want toleration. They want equality. That is what Islam unable to accept. If the Jews were saying, okay, you accept the Islamic rule and stay, no problems. But Zionism challenged the fundamental premise. I want equality, I don't want toleration. They are fundamentally different. The second thing was, Jewish national home is not a problem. They wanted a Jewish national home in a territory which was seen as vast property. So your motive is challenging Islam and your location is also challenging Islam. That is why not just the Arabs, even Indonesia has problem with Israel. Theological argument. And I think that is what I would put it. It's not a question of negotiation. If you say, I surrender to you, submit to you, any day. But if you want equality, not on my watch. That's the position. Thank you. You know, I'm extremely grateful to everybody. You know, to come on here, take your time, and give me an opportunity to share my understanding. I will always cherish this moment. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking a lot about the book, Squaring the Circle, and about the ideas that Kumar has written in it, but we haven't actually seen the book. So here it is, it does exist. Unfortunately, this is our only copy at the reading room of the Institute. And I understand from Kumar that you have some flyers that you brought. If not, if you are interested in reading the book, let us know at the Institute. We would love to hear from you, and we'll make it possible for you to order it. I believe I paid for our copy 500 Indian rupees, which I wouldn't even try to calculate how much it would come to in Canadian dollars. Before I would let you go and enjoy some of the refreshments, and also, of course, feel free to grab Kumar for informal talks in the hallways. Let me remind you of some of our important upcoming events and initiatives, because we are looking forward to a very busy and exciting summer as well as fall. If you are a Montreal student at any of the Montreal universities, or you have friends, relatives who are enrolled in UDM, UQAM, McGill or Concordia, please tell them that we are in the process of organizing our second summer school, Azrieli Institute Summer in Jerusalem, which will be taking place from July 16th to August 14th. The participating students will earn important Concordia credits towards their degree programs, and we are accepting applications from Concordia, but non-Concordia students as well. We are holding our next orientation session on March 27th. Further information is available on our website. We also have, in celebration of the 70th anniversary of the creation of the State of Israel, a citywide student essay competition, which is open to any Montreal-based CEGEP, undergraduate or graduate student. The winners will be announced and congratulated, as well as handed over cash prizes at our international conference, which we are jointly holding with the Sde-Boker campus, the research institute on the history of Zionism, which is located at the Sde-Boker campus of Ben Gurion University. This conference, which will be open to you, to the public, on July 3rd, 4th, and 5th. The conference will take place at Concordia. We have many other exciting events that we are working on in the fall semester. Please keep us posted. We would like to keep you posted. Let us know how we can reach you. We do have sheets available in the back. If you give us your contact information, we will be sure to put you on our mailing list. Once again, thank you very much for choosing to take advantage of this learning opportunity tonight. In the remaining half an hour or so, we must vacate the room by 9 o'clock. That's what Roxana told us, and we want to obey Roxana to make sure that we can continue coming back. Enjoy the refreshments and enjoy further conversations with Kumar. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.